Hello and welcome to our lesson on least common multiple, and we call that LCM. This word least is what confuses a lot of kids with the GCF. So I want you to follow along with me on the least common multiple lesson, and then I would love for you to go back in your notes or even watch the video on greatest common factor. The key word in this is multiple, and I've drawn a little frog head to remind you that the numbers are going to hop. So they are going to get bigger. We're looking for a multiple. So let's go through the words. First of all, we have multiple, and I've called it a hop. It is the product of a number and any other non-zero whole number. So it could be 8 times 2. That's a multiple of 8. 8 times 3, 8 times 4, all of those numbers. 8, 16, 8, 16, 24, 8 times 4 is 32. So those are all hops of 8. For 2, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. For 3, we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. We do count this one because it is 2 times 1. So a common multiple is a hop that is shared by 2 numbers or more. Could be 3 numbers. So we're going to take a look up here at 2 and 3 and find all of the common multiples. So obviously 2 isn't. Oh, I do see that 6 they have in common, and I do see that they have a 12 in common. So the common multiples shared by 2 and 3 are the numbers 6 and 12. There are more. The first 2 multiples are 6 and 12. So you can probably guess by patterns what you think the next common multiple is. It's a great thing about math. So we're going to find 2 common multiples of 3 and 5. So I'm going to pause the video, and you pause it too, and I'm going to have you do 3 and 5 and 8 and 10, and we'll come back together and see if we have the same ones in common. All right, if you look at what my strategy was for 2 common multiples, is I listed all of their multiples first for all of these numbers, and I took my green pen and I circled the ones that they had in common. So if you look here, I found the 15, 30, likely the next one is going to be 45. You can check me out on that. This one is 40, 80. Logical next step was going to be 120, which brings us to what is the least common multiple. The least common multiple is whichever one of those numbers is the smallest. So the first one that they hop to, I call this the first lily pad that they both jump to. So a 3 can jump to the lily pad that's 3, 6, 9, 12, but the first one they would both jump on is the lily pad named 15. The next one would be 30, but the smallest lily pad that they're going to meet up first is at lily pad number 15. Same thing here. These 8 and 10, if those frogs can only jump on multiples of their numbers, they're going to jump on the lily pad 40 first. So that is the LCM. I'm going to label that. So there are 2 methods, and what we're going to do first is the one that I've already done with you. It's the method 1 is list the multiples of each number and find the smallest one. So we did that, and we got 2 common multiples, but we counted the smallest one as the LCM. The second one, of course, is prime factorization. So watch with me as we do the first one together, and we'll do some more examples, because prime factorization I really like, but you need to understand what to do and which numbers to include and which numbers to exclude. So we are going to look at the numbers 9, use my red pen, and 12. These are my numbers. I want to see what number they're going to hop to first, and you can't see those quite as readily as you can 3 and 5. You can usually see the 15. Well, this one I see the 3 times 3 in the factor tree, and I see that this one will be 3 times 2 times 2. So what I did, this is step number 1. Step number 2, I wrote their prime factorization. So I wrote 3 times 3, and that's my 9. And then I wrote 2 times 2 times 3. I went ahead and expanded it out because it's easier for me to see. I used green to find they had a 3 in common. So we're going to color that in. Any number that you color in like that, you use these numbers only one time because they have them in common. So what I did was I said, okay, I need to do a 3 and a 2 and a 2 for sure. So all the numbers that are not circled, and then this 3 I only do one time. So I do 3 times 3 times 2 times 2. And what I did was wrote that like this. I combined them to a 9 times a 4, which is 36. You could list these out, 9, 18, 27, 36, and then 12, 24, 36. You could do that, but I wanted to show you with the prime factorization method how it works. We'll go through this one again. So what I want you to do is I want you to write a factor tree for the numbers 8 and 14. Okay? That's all I want you to do right now, and we are going to go through together what is their LCM. Okay, so I got 8 is a pretty obvious one, 2 times 2 times 2, and then 7 times 2. So what I did over here was I did 2 times 2 times 2, and I did 2 times 7. I can already see the ring around 2 of the 2's, so I'm only going to use this 2 one time. So I'm going to do 2 times 2 times 2 times 7. I'm not going to use that one because it's what they have in common. It makes the LCM truly the lowest common multiple. So I figured out 2 times 2 times 2. I know all of that is an 8, and 8 times 7 is 56. So the LCM of 8 and 14 is going to be a 56. Would you please try 50 and 90, and we'll go through this one together. Okay, so for this technique, you might have used a different factor tree. You will end up having a 2 times a 5 times a 5. And then for 90, you will end up having a 2 times a 3 times a 3 times a 5. And I've written that in order up here. 2 times 5 times 5, 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. So we're going to draw our rings around what they have in common. We're only going to use this 2 one time and this 5 one time. We have to use these 3. So those are your must-haves. So it ends up being 2 times 5 times 5, and then we're going to do times 3 times 3. We've already used those up here, so we're not going to reuse those. I like to factor tree it down, so an upside down tree. So I did 2 times 5 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and then times 3, which makes it 150 times 3, which makes my final answer the LCM of 50 and 90 all the way up to 450. You can see how nice it is to be able to use this technique because you get to that LCM really quickly without having to do a whole bunch of multiplication of these numbers. One thing that last year's class asked me to do was to teach them what to do if you have a group of 3 numbers. And it is a little bit trickier. I use 2 colors when I do this one. So if you would quickly work with me to develop the factor tree for 4, 9, and 24, I got to 2 times 2, 9 is 3 times 3, and then 24, 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So what I did with this is I used 2 different colors of pens. So I see that 4 and 24 have 2 2's in common. So I went ahead and circled those in orange. And then I see that these two have a 3 in common, so I circled those in a different color in green. So we're only going to use these numbers. Sometimes I do cross out the ones I'm not going to use so I don't forget. So what I do is I do 2 times 2 times 3, and this 3 is not circled, so you have to use him. We've already used these guys, times 2. So I list that out. It's important you show your work or you'll forget. 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 2. When you do this, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. I kept the 2, and so I just did 36 times 2 is 72. So it works with 3, and these two can have things in common, and these two can have things in common. As long as you circle them and only use one of them, you're good to go. Okay? So if you, let's say that these two had a different number, like a 7 in common, you could have circled that. I use a different color, so I use like purple for the next one, and it really helps me keep track, and it's easier to find these. The other technique you are welcome to use is doing multiples, 24, 48, 72, and on up. You can list them, but I wanted to show you how to do this method with 3. Either method will work, but sometimes it's nice to use the prime factorization. In LCM, the numbers get bigger. In GCF, you're looking for a factor or a little piece of a number that two of them have in common. So that's the biggest difference. Go back and read those notes. Good luck on your assignment today. Please see me if you have any questions. Most of them we will be finding the LCM of 2 numbers. I showed you the 3 just so that you got a taste of how it works. Thanks, everyone.